Where you lived when you were first born, and a bit about your parents and their background.
I was born in Burgess Hill, in Hampstead, and we lived there until I was about 5. I had a sister who was 20 months younger than me, and a brother who was another 2 years younger, and another brother who was born 9 years later. We moved to Frognall Lane in Hampstead, and I can remember vividly walking with my mother, who was heavily pregnant, my sister, and myself, and my brother. No, my mother was pregnant with my brother, that's right. My sister was in the pram, and I was walking outside to the new house in Frognall Lane. Can you turn it off, please?
Oh, do you want to hear it back?
No, not yet.
Okay. So now tell me,
I went to a school in Hampstead called St Margaret's.
Yeah.
I lived in a nursery upstairs with a nanny, a brother and sister, and eventually the younger brother as well. We had a nanny and a nurse's help. I don't know what
Mother's help.
No, a nanny's help.
Oh, nanny's help, yeah.
And a maid for the nanny, you know. Three servants. There was a cook, a house parlour maid, and a housemaid, and a daily woman, and a chauffeur, and a gardener.
Upstairs, downstairs.
But we were all one happy family. I mean, the staff were part of the family, and they were very happy to be with us always.
What a change to the 1980s.
It's a very different world. And we used to sit in the dining room. There was always a maid standing in the dining room waiting to give us second helpings. We were never allowed to answer the front door. The maid had to answer the front door. The maids wore one uniform in the mornings, which was blue with little white caps and a white apron, and in the afternoons they wore a black uniform. I used to go to the kitchen with my mother when she gave the orders to the cook for the food, and I was allowed in once a year to stir the Christmas pudding. This probably shouldn't be on here.
Well, I'm just waiting to ask you about whether they belonged to any synagogue or what sort of Jewish...
Yes, my parents were married at Dennington Park. Well, I think they were married at Dennington Park. They belonged to Dennington Park Road Synagogue.
Yes.
And I remember going there and sitting upstairs and looking down and seeing how many boyfriends I'd got downstairs. And it never felt like a religious place to me. On the Day of Atonement, we used to count how many people passed out. The conversation up there was all about who got a new hat and how awful so-and-so looked. And it was all gossipy, and it didn't feel religious. And when I was about 16, I said to my father, I'd like to join a liberal congregation because this doesn't feel comfortable to me.
But as a child, did you have any religious...
yes,
did you go to
we had a Miss Friedlander who came to teach us Hebrew. Did you have her too? Yes. I don't remember going...
At home she came then?
She came to the house, yes, to our home. Yes. I don't remember going to any Heder at all.
No.
I went away to boarding school when I was... before I went to boarding school, I went to Queen's College in Harley Street. I was there for a couple of years, and then I went away to boarding school, which was Micklefield in Seaford in Sussex. And there I became a brown owl. I started the brownies. They never had any brownies there. And I took my school certificate for matriculation, and I failed in maths. I didn't stay to take it again. I went to Switzerland to be finished, and then I went to London School of Economics.
Can I just go back a little bit and ask you whether your parents kept any... I mean, you mentioned about a Christmas pudding, so obviously there was something there. But did they have a Seder service?
They kept Passover, but didn't keep any of the other festivals at all, except for the Day of Atonement and New Year. And Passover, but otherwise I didn't really have a very religious background.
You didn't? No.
But my father had his seat at Dennington Park Road, and he felt he would like to have come with me to a liberal congregation, but because his father and his grandfather and his great-grandfather had all had seats in that synagogue, he felt he was too old to change.
Yes.
And sadly my brother, who was only 18, was killed during the war, and my mother lost any religious faith that she might have had because she felt there couldn't possibly be a God.
Did your brothers have a bar mitzvah?
My eldest brother had a bar mitzvah, and I can remember that very clearly.
What do you remember about that?
Red. I remember him standing there, and I remember the sun shining through the roof onto him while he was standing there.
It's a beautiful synagogue there.
It's a lovely synagogue.
Did you not feel anything at that particular time?
I must have
done. I think it's really rather
Yes,
beautiful.
I must have done. And I remember the party afterwards. And you dressed
yes,
for the party.
Who was the rabbi, do you know?
Mr. Green.
Green.
Green. I don't really remember a lot about the religious influences, but it was sort of all round me.
Yes,
we had an enormous family, huge. Mother was one of 9, father was one of 6.
Yes.
I had about 25 first cousins.
Yes.
We all lived near together, and we were all in and out of each other's houses all the time. I also had a lot of second cousins. And so the whole of our social life revolved around the family, and the synagogue was periphery.
Yes, yes.
But it wasn't really central.
No. So when you were about 16 and you wanted to
change to the Liberal.
Where did you go first?
To St John's Wood.
Right,
yes,
I see.
To the Liberal
I
St John's
see.
Wood. Actually, I must have been older than that, because my first marriage was at the Liberal at St John's Wood, and I was 21 then.
Well, do you want to go back a little bit and talk about before that time when you said we're talking about going to university, did you, or college?
Yes, I went to London School of Economics.
Yes.
To read social science. But it was just before the war, and I was a BAD. I failed my exam, the first exam at LSE, became a BAD. I was a mobile BAD.
You better explain what those initials stand for.
Voluntary Aid Detachment. I was a Red Cross nurse.
Yes.
And I worked at University College Hospital, and I felt when I got engaged that I might get sent anywhere in the world, and my husband get sent anywhere in the world, and we'd never meet. So I became an immobile voluntary aid detachment, BAD, which meant that I stayed at University College Hospital. I didn't get sent abroad.
You got engaged during the war?
Yes, I got engaged in January of 1940, and I was married in June 1940.
Yes.
It's 47 years ago.
Yes.
A long time ago. I did a lot of voluntary work before marriage. I worked in the East End of London in clubs. And I can remember working in a soup at Seymour Place.
What clubs were you in?
Cambridge and Bethnal Green. I used to go down there. It was part of the family ethos to do voluntary work. My father didn't want me to have a job. He didn't want me to go to university. He didn't want me to train. He just wanted me to get married. And he said it's a waste of time and money to train for anything, because girls find a tall, dark, handsome man, and they get married and live happily ever after.
Sign of the times,
Yeah. And I wanted to nurse. I wanted to be a physiotherapist. There were lots of things I wanted to do, and he wouldn't hear of any of it. So I ended up rather a mess, not doing a bit of this and a bit of that, and not really passing any exams, and not quite making it anywhere.
So you didn't. There was no question that you might join the services in the war. I mean,
during the war, I was a member of the LJS at St John's Wood, and I became much more religiously involved.
No, I'm sorry, we had a misunderstanding there.
I meant the war.
Yes, I meant to join the WAFs or the.
No, because I married in June 1940. I was engaged in January 1940, and I was a VAD.
So that was sufficient. You didn't.
The women weren't called up by that time.
Oh, I see.
They weren't at the very beginning of the war. They weren't called up. And then when I'd been married 16 months, I had Richard, and if you had a child, you couldn't be called up.
I see. Yes.
No, I didn't have to be. I didn't do anything other than the nursing.
Yes.
And then bringing up my children.
Yes. And your husband was away. Was he doing?
He was away in France in 1940. He came back with the British Expeditionary Force on June the 12th, 1940, and we married a week later. we were already engaged.
Yes, yes.
We felt we had no money, but we felt we might as well have a bit of happiness while we could.
That's right.
There was a lot of family disagreement about whether we should marry or not. I don't remember doing very much about it. I remember it being organised all for me.
Yes. And did you you were obviously in London all through the bombing. I mean, that must have been quite difficult for you with small children.
It was very hard. We lived in Mill Hill. I was a camp follower in the first few months of marriage.
What's that mean?
I followed the
I see,
and I lived in digs in one room wherever we could.
Yes.
And then we took a little furnished house in Mill Hill when I was going to have Richard. And when Richard was born, that's where we lived, in that little furnished house in Mill Hill. Yes. And then he was going to be sent to the Middle East, and we gave up the house, and I went back to live with my parents with Richard for about a year, and then that was very hard.
Yes.
And we decided to get a flat, and I got a flat. He didn't go to the Middle East.
So, what year did you join the Liberal Synagogue in St John's Wood?
Well, when I was married in 1940. We were married by Dr. Mattis.
Oh, well, tell us a little bit about all that.
I remember very clearly when I was engaged being taken to visit Dr. and Mrs. Mattis, who lived up by the Whitestone Pond in Hampstead, and he was a very memorable man. He had a terrific presence, and when he gave a blessing, everybody felt as though they were being blessed. If he put his hands up like that, and I can remember it the rest of my life. I'll never forget what it felt like to be blessed by him. It was a very moving experience, and he was a very good friend of my in-laws. And they had become members of the Liberal in 1912. When it was in Hill Street.
Yes, quite early.
Yes, before other synagogues was built.
Did you play any part in the synagogue life in those early days? Or during the war?
Not during the war, but when I had 3 children, they got me involved in the Women's Society, and I went on the committee of the Women's Society at St John's Wood.
Tell us a bit about that.
I was responsible for social services, and the chairman was Mrs. Meyer, Humphrey Meyer, not Humphrey Meyer. I don't know which Mrs. Meyer it was, I can't remember. Then Peggy Lewson was chairman. Then Dora Warcher was chairman. Dorothy Edgar was on it. Nina Atwell, who was my second cousin, and Nina Nathan, of course. I can't remember all of the other people, and your mother-in-law, of course.
That's right. Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
I remember she used to do sewing for the Highbury home. Was it for babies?
Yeah. We did all sorts of things. But it meant going every month to a meeting.
Yes.
While things were discussed and various things were done. But because I had 3 children, there wasn't an awful lot I could do.
Did you have a car, or did you have to?
I didn't have a car. No, I went by train. I didn't have a car until after my father died. But I only lived in Hampstead. It wasn't that far. I went on the bus.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
So then the children.
I lived in Hatch End.
Well, when did you move to Hatch End?
I moved to Hatch End in 1947. When my second son, Peter, was born on VE Day, the VE Day.
So that would be May the 8th, 1945.
That's right. And when he was about 16 months old, we gave up the flat and we got a house in Hatch End. And I vividly remember how difficult it was looking after 2 children with no help at all.
And the house must be big after a small flat.
And the house, and I had a lovely old lady called Hilly, who was stone deaf, who used to help me in Hampstead, and she used to come out at weekends and give me some help. She was a wonderful, wonderful person. I didn't know when I first interviewed her that she was deaf, because she had taught herself to lip read, and she had no children, and she had gone completely deaf when her husband died from shock. And the children would never believe that she was deaf. They used to stand behind her and say boo, and she didn't move. And then they learnt to pull her skirt if they wanted to get her attention. And she used to babysit for me, because she would sit and watch the baby, and she would see if it was crying and pick it up. She really was more than a help. She was a friend.
So as the children began to grow up...
Woodbine. She used to smoke. I used to have to buy her 20 woodbines.
As the children began to grow up, did they have any religious education?
Yes, they were all confirmed at St John's Wood, liberal at St John's Wood. The three elder ones. Yeah.
So did they have a correspondence course, or did
yes, when they went away to boarding school, they did correspondence. But when before they went away to boarding school, we used to take them up to St John's Wood.
So who did they do the correspondence course with? Who were their teachers?
I can't remember.
Miss Moose probably was one.
Well, Miss Moose was their teacher when they were up there, but she didn't do their correspondence. I
Who
can't
confirmed
remember
them?
I think Leslie Edgar. I think. It's a long time ago.
Yes, that's right. Sort of, I'm jogging your memory a little bit.
I'm not too sure. I think it was Leslie Edgar. But we had a small party when each of them were confirmed. And because I had found it tiresome to travel from Hatchend to St John's Wood, and for them to have to do that when there was a possibility of a congregation out here, I was very anxious to join it, because I had by that time got Stephen, who was born 8 years later, and I didn't want to have to start doing that all over again. I thought it would be very nice if he could be part of a local congregation, and we could as well.
But I remember that it might have skipped your memory that I believe you went to Wembley in the middle.
No, never went to Wembley. Not me. We ran with Dora Walshover.
No.
With the older three, and I don't remember an awful lot about it later on, because I was so ill in 69 and my memory isn't all that good.
Okay, so we'll sort of skip that middle period. So then Northwood began to get underway.
Yes.
And did early meetings?
I went to the very first meeting in the fog, and then again to the second meeting, and went to a meeting in Alan Lewis's house when he discussed having a council.
Yes.
And I was interested because I wanted to have a local congregation for my younger son, and I feel it's very important that parents go to services and don't just send their children away, which was what had been happening a bit at St John's Wood, because we couldn't get up there, and I wanted us to be all involved in something. What actually happened was at that meeting, my first husband was asked if he would join the council, and he said he was very interested, but he was much too busy, but he was quite sure his wife would be very pleased to go on the council. And then I got landed, and that's how I was on the very first council.
Yes.
And initially I did membership.
Yes.
And then Alan one day said to me he would like to start a women's society. Would I start it? And I didn't really want to, because by that time I was quite involved with marriage guidance. I didn't know if I'd got the time, but I was the only one there who'd had any experience of actually being on a women's society.
That's quite.
So I felt it wasn't fair of me to continue to say no. In fact, I think what happened was we had a Rabbi Familand who used to come from Oxford, and he used to stay sometimes in our house in Pinner. And he gave a sermon one day which made me realise that I was being very selfish in saying no. And so I said, okay, I'll start it.
Yes. Did your older children become involved at all?
They were away at school. They became involved in St John's Wood. I don't think they really ever became very involved in Northwood. They were too old.
No. Yes, at that stage. That's
right.
That's
they were much more involved with St John's Wood.
Yes. So,
Bridget was born in 1941.
Yes.
Peter in 1945.
Yes.
And Prue in 1948.
Yes.
But they were really all grown up.
That's right. And then Stephen came here to religious school.
Stephen was very involved with the congregation, yes.
Youth club, was he involved with that?
Yes, at one time, yes.
Because he also went away to boarding school, didn't he?
He went away to boarding school, but he didn't, that didn't stop him from coming to the congregation, because it was near.
Yeah.
It was so much easier.
So really your main area of activity in our synagogue has really been with the Women's Society, hasn't it?
In the synagogue,
yes.
But I've done lots of other things. I mean, that's only been a part of my life, really. Well, in 1958, I went up for selection to be a marriage counsellor, and to my great surprise was accepted, and it was a 2-year training. And I then withdrew from the Women's Society at LJS because I felt I couldn't do both. At this time I had 4 children.
Yeah.
And although the eldest was 16 by this time, they still required a certain amount of attention. And I've written about it.
Oh, well,
I wrote that in 1979.
I'll read that. Yes.
I'll give you more of an idea.
Yes, yes.
Of what I did.
Tell me about where did you meet Dick?
I met Dick at Michael Lever's New Year's Eve party in 1974, and Stephen, I had a boyfriend staying and 2 girls, and we all went to the New Year's Eve party, and Dick was with Bertram.
Oh, yeah.
And we had a few minutes of conversation, and that was all. And about 2 months later...
Was that the first time you'd met him?
Yes,
you hadn't met him at the synagogue?
I'd never met him before, although he was treasurer. And I was president of the Women's Society. We hadn't actually met. And the strange thing was that he had made a radiogram for my first husband, but I'd never met him. But I had met his first wife on one occasion when she was very ill in a wheelchair at Michael Bucks's house when we had area meetings. And Violet Levy was there. Louis Levy is our common cousin because my father's first cousin married Dick's mother's first cousin. And those were Lewis's parents.
Yes.
Lewis's second cousins with each, but we're not related to each other.
So it's quite interesting, really, when you think about your name change. Tell us about that.
I've got my maiden name back again, yes. I've been Conradi for 35 years. It was terribly difficult to get used to my name going back to Cohen again. And when people would call me Mrs. Cohen, I would turn round and think they were talking to my mother.
Yes.
I couldn't believe it was me. It's taken me a long time, but we've been married 10.5 years now. I use both the name Conradi and the name Cohen. Professionally, I'm Conradi, and privately, I'm Cohen.
Well, that's very interesting, Dulcie. Anything else you'd like to tell us? You're going to continue on as, I believe, your term of office?
When I did a year of being chairman of the Women's Society, I then felt I'd got it into some kind of order, and suggested that I would withdraw and let somebody else take it on. And Carla Tomsky took it on. And we were then, in those days, we had about 10 or 12 people who were members of the Women's Society. It wasn't the whole congregation as it is now. And I can't remember who it was said, "Oh, you're not going to get away with that. You'll have to be president. We can't let you go." So I was then made president. So that was in about 1966, I think. But for the last 2 or 3 years, I've felt that really somebody else should have the opportunity. It shouldn't be the same president all the time. But I had great difficulty in persuading anybody that this was a good idea until last year, when I didn't go to the meetings so they could discuss it. And it was agreed that I should continue for another 2 years, and after that I will withdraw.
Yes, so you'll find some other useful part that you can play in the congregation, no doubt.
If they want me. I don't know whether I don't think it's a very good idea for old people to go on holding on to office.
No, but you can change office.
Well, I don't know whether there's anything else I can usefully do.
I'm sure there is.
I've been very involved with the Association for Pastoral Care and Counselling for the last 7 years. I've been on the committee, the Activities Committee, and that's meant going up regularly to Seymour Place for meetings.
And what about Jack's? You've been very involved with him?
I'm involved with Jack's in that I'm the welfare officer, supporting Dick as
what do you have to do as welfare officer?
As welfare officer, I have interpreted it as meaning I have to be there to welcome people when they come. I know how awful it is to go into a building as a stranger and not know anybody. So I feel it's very important to welcome people. And I look around always, and if there's somebody there who doesn't seem to know anybody, I introduce them to people.
But what about if
the actual welfare work that I was asked to do, I was told I was not to do any hospital visiting at all. That was not part of Jax's.
If any of your members are ill?
No. Anybody who is in hospital, I'm told, and I send a get well card. Anybody who's bereaved of a close relative, I write them a personal letter from Northwood Jax, and if it's somebody we know personally, from Dick and I as well. And I keep a note in a little book of all the letters I've written and all the cards I've sent.
Are you going to continue doing that?
No, because Dick, having done his 3.5 years as chairman, is retiring from the committee, and I felt it would not be fair on the next chairman if I stayed on the committee, so I was withdrawing from the committee as well. And this will give two other people an opportunity of coming on the committee. Also felt it would be very unfair to the new chairman, who's David Griffiths, to have me on his committee, perhaps reporting back to Dick what's going on. Dick has been given the honour of being asked to be treasurer for the whole of Jax, and as there are 20 Jax groups, he's going to be quite busy, and I probably will have to be involved in doing things with him on that. I don't feel I want to stop doing everything, no, but I don't think it's a good thing to hold on too long to any kind of office. I feel one should change.
That's it. I see. Wait a minute. Okay, Dulcie, there's something else you'd like to add?
Yes. When Dick and I were going to get married, I felt I would like to get married in 1977 because I like 7. Because my mother was the 7th child. My parents were married on the 7th of December. My own birthday is the 7th of November. My first husband was the 7th of July, and Dick's the 7th of October. And we thought we'll get married on the 7th of January 1977.
You couldn't wait till July.
Yes, we want to. This was in August of 76.
Yes.
But the 7th of January turned out to be a Friday, and when we were discussing it with Andrew, he said, oh no, Friday's not a very good day for weddings. You should get married on a Wednesday, because the old idea in the Bible was that marriages should be on a Wednesday, and on a Thursday, if the husband wasn't satisfied, he could take his wife back to the mosque. So that's why we got married on January the 5th, 1977, and not January the 7th.
And Dick presumably was satisfied.
Well, he hasn't taken me back.
No, that's rather a nice story to finish on. Thank you.